Okay, so I want to start today with a bit of a word association game. If I say Windows Vista to you, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, that's easy. A groan. I mean,
Yeah.
physically, a groan. It's like a collective memory of frustration.
Exactly. It's an eye roll. It's that story everyone has about their laptop battery suddenly lasting like 45 minutes or their brand new printer just becoming a plastic brick overnight.
It is absolutely the tech world's biggest punchline. In the Hall of Fame for corporate failures, it's got its own little pedestal right there next to New Coke. It's just remembered as this complete disaster that sat between, the beloved Windows XP and the OS that saved everyone, Windows 7.
Right, that is the accepted story. Vista was the flop. But here's the thing. We have this pile of source material in front of us. We're talking internal Microsoft development logs, deep technical analyses of the kernel architecture, even legal documents from some of the class action lawsuits. And when you actually get into the weeds, the story looks, well, it looks completely different. It's not a story about a lazy product or just, a bad interface. It's more like a controlled demolition of the entire Windows ecosystem that just went spectacularly right and spectacularly wrong, all at the same time.
That is a much, much better way to put it.
Sure.
Yeah. The simple story that Vista was just bad or buggy completely ignores what they were actually trying to do.
Yeah.
You have to remember the mindset at Microsoft in the early 2000s.
The ambition.
The ambition, the arrogance, all of it. They weren't just trying to put a new coat of paint on XP. They were trying to fundamentally rebuild the relationship between software and hardware from the ground up.
And that really is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to dig in and try to figure out if Vista was genuinely the disaster everyone remembers, or if it was something else. Was it the misunderstood murder of the PC world?
The sacrificial lamb, yeah.
Was it the operating system that had to take all the bullets, all the broken drivers, the insane hardware requirements, the constant security nagging, so that everything that came after it could actually work?
I will go on record right now and say it. Without the pain and the suffering of Windows Vista, Windows 7 would not have been possible. And honestly, the Windows PC as a reasonably secure platform might not even exist today.
That's a huge claim, a really bold claim. So, okay, let's test that theory. We have to go back to the beginning. And I was looking at the timeline, and the beginning isn't 2007 when it launched. It's not even 2005.
Not even close, no. The story really kicks off in May of 2001.
Which is just wild to me. I mean, Windows XP, the OS it was supposed to replace, didn't even come out until October 2001. So Microsoft engineers are 5 months deep into building the next thing before we've even seen the last thing.
That's exactly right. And the project had a codename, Longhorn. The name itself tells you what the original plan was supposed to be.
Right, because XP was Whistler.
XP was Whistler. And the next huge revolutionary OS they had planned for way down the road was codenamed Blackcomb.
So Whistler and Blackcomb, the two big ski mountains, and Longhorn is...
It's the name of the saloon at the base of the mountain right between the two.
So it was just supposed to be a quick pit stop, a minor release, like grab a beer and get back on the lift?
That was the idea, yeah, for about
Yeah.
5 minutes. But you have to remember the context. This is 2001. Microsoft is an absolute juggernaut. They have a monopoly. They have basically infinite money. And Bill Gates, specifically, is obsessed with this idea of managed code.
Okay, we need to pause here because this is a really critical technical point. The documents mention managed code over and over again as the original sin of the Longhorn project. So what does that actually mean?
So traditionally, an operating system like Windows is written in languages like C and C++ fast.
Yeah.
That's what we call native code. It's talking directly to the metal, to the hardware.
Super fast, super efficient.
Right. Super fast, but also super dangerous. If you're a developer and you make one tiny mistake managing the computer's memory in C++, you can crash the entire system.
That's the blue screen of death. That's what that is.
That is the blue screen of death, precisely. Now, managed code, on the other hand, and you can think of things like .NET or Java, it's different. It runs inside a sort of protective bubble, a virtual environment. It handles all the memory stuff for you. It has garbage collection that comes around. It cleans up memory that's not being used. It is way, way safer and easier for the average developer to write code in.
Okay, so Microsoft's big idea was, hey, why don't we build the next Windows using this much safer, much more modern code?
Not just part of it. They wanted to write the entire user interface and a bunch of the core systems in managed code. The graphics system was a project called Avalon, and the file system was this revolutionary thing called WinFS. The dream was to turn Windows into this hyper-modern object-oriented platform.
So if it's safer and it's easier, why was it such a complete disaster?
Because of one simple thing. The hardware in 2003 was just not ready for it. Managed code has overhead. It needs more processing power. It needs more RAM to run that protective bubble. And trying to run the entire visual shell of an operating system in managed code on, say, a Pentium 4 with 256 megabytes of RAM, it was absolute performance suicide.
So they were designing this futuristic jet engine and trying to cram it inside a lawnmower?
It's worse than that. It was like they were designing a jet engine that couldn't even start. By 2004, the Longhorn project is 3 years old. You have thousands of developers checking in code every single day. But the system itself, the actual OS, was so bloated and so unstable and so unbelievably slow that you couldn't even get a daily build to run reliably enough to test anything.
Wow.
Jim Allchin, who was the co-president of Windows at the time, he has this famous internal memo where he says the development process is crashing into the ground.
And then this is what leads to the famous reset. This part of the story feels like it's straight out of a movie. I was reading about the Omega 13 builds.
Yeah, and that little detail tells you everything you need to know about how desperate they were. By mid-2004, the leadership team finally admits that Longhorn is a lost cause. It's unsalvageable. You can't just fix the bugs because the fundamental architecture, this huge bet on managed code before the hardware could handle it, was the bug. So they decide to nuke the whole thing.
So 3 full years of work, I mean, thousands and thousands of hours of engineering just gone, deleted.
Pretty much shelved, yeah. They made this brutal decision to take the existing stable code base from Windows Server 2003, which was boring, but it was solid and it was written in old school native code, and start over. They would basically graft the ideas from Longhorn onto this old, reliable skeleton.
And that's where the name Omega 13 comes from.
Exactly. It's a reference to the time travel device in the movie Galaxy Quest. It's a device that lets you go back in time 13 seconds to undo a catastrophic mistake.
That's not a joke. That is a cry for help.
It was a prayer. They were hitting the reset button on 3 years of failure.
But you can't just do that. You can't just throw away 3 years of work in 2004 and still expect to ship something in 2006 without making some massive cuts.
Oh, they had to cut the heart and soul out of the original dream. WinFS, that amazing revolutionary file system that was going to change how we search for data forever. Gone. Kicked down the road. The whole idea of writing the OS in managed code, scrapped completely. They had to frantically rewrite the Avalon graphics system, which later became Windows Presentation Foundation, or WPF, just to get it to run on top of the old architecture. It was an absolute scramble.
So when they finally come out and announce the official name Windows Vista in 2005, it's already a compromise. It's what's left over after a brutal internal war.
It is. But, and this is so important, even though they abandoned the managed code dream, they did not abandon all the other massive architectural changes they had planned. And this is really where the whole martyr argument begins, because they stuck with their plan to fundamentally change the way Windows draws pixels on your screen.
And this is Aero, the famous glass look, the transparent window borders. The thing that at the time I just figured was Microsoft looking over at what Apple was doing and saying, ooh, shiny, we want that.
And it was definitely about marketing. I mean, Aero was an acronym for authentic, energetic, reflective, and open.
Oh, that is pure marketing fluff.
It's a total fluff. But under the hood, technologically, it was a genuine paradigm shift. See, in Windows XP and every version before it, the CPU, the main brain of the computer, was responsible for drawing all the windows and buttons.
The central processor, right?
Yes. And the thing is, CPUs are actually terrible at graphics. That's why if you were dragging a window around in XP and the system got busy, you'd get that smearing effect.
Oh, the trailing. Yeah, like a deck of ghost windows following your cursor. I remember that so clearly.
That's the CPU struggling to repaint the screen fast enough. Vista introduced something called the Desktop Window Manager, the DWM, and it completely changed that pipeline. From now on, applications didn't draw directly to the screen anymore. They drew to a little buffer in memory. And then the DWM would take all those buffers and hand them off to the GPU, your graphics card, to stitch them all together into the final image you see.
So wait, for the very first time, the Windows desktop was being rendered like it was a 3D video game.
That is the perfect way to describe it. Every single window was basically a texture map on a 3D plane. And that's what allowed for all the cool stuff. The real-time blur, the transparency, the smooth animations, that flip 3D card shuffling thing, it totally eliminated screen tearing and smearing.
This creates a huge new problem, a massive barrier to entry, because all of a sudden you couldn't just have any computer. You needed a computer with a proper, dedicated graphics processor. You needed, 128 megabytes of video RAM.
At a minimum, yes. Which, back in 2006, was basically a gaming PC spec, not what you'd find in your average Dell Office desktop. And this leads us directly to one of the biggest scandals of the entire Vista launch, the Vista-capable lawsuit.
Okay, I really want to dig into this because this felt like a genuine betrayal to a lot of customers. You'd go into a store, you'd see a brand new laptop with this shiny Vista-capable sticker on it. You'd buy it thinking you're getting that cool glass interface from the commercials, and then you get home and it looks like Windows 2000.
You got the Vista Basic theme,
Yeah.
which was this flat, gray, ugly interface. And the reason why is this fascinating bit of corporate hardball. Intel, the chip maker, had a big problem. Their most common integrated graphics chipsets, the 915 series, were not powerful enough to run Aero. They just didn't have the horsepower or the right driver support.
But those are the chips that Intel was selling by the millions to PC makers like Dell and HP for all their budget and mid-range machines.
Exactly. And we know from internal emails that came out during the lawsuit that Intel heavily pressured Microsoft to lower the bar for that Vista-capable sticker so they could keep selling all those weak, cheap chipsets to their partners. If Microsoft had stood their ground and said, nope, to be Vista-capable, you must be able to run Aero, Intel sales would completely cratered.
So Microsoft blinked. They caved. They let PC makers slap this sticker on hardware that couldn't actually run the single most defining visual feature of the entire operating system.
And customers were furious. They felt totally scammed. You buy a brand new PC and it feels obsolete the second you turn it on. But looking back, the DWM, the GPU composited desktop, it was the right technical decision. Every modern OS does it this way now. iOS, Android, macOS, Windows 11, they all do it. Vista just took the arrows for introducing it before the low-end hardware was really ready for prime time.
That feels like a recurring theme here. Right idea, wrong time. Okay, let's shift to the other part of the Vista experience that drove everyone absolutely insane, the security. Specifically, user account control.
UAC. The three little letters that launched 1,000 angry forum posts.
You have to explain the logic here, because from a user's perspective, it just felt like your computer was actively fighting you. You try to install a program, the whole screen goes dark. You try to change the system clock, the screen goes dark. Cancel or allow. Cancel or allow. Why on earth was it so aggressive?
To get why UAC existed, you have to transport yourself back to the absolute security nightmare that was the Windows XP era. In XP, by default, pretty much every single user account was a full administrator.
Right, which meant I could do anything I wanted on my machine.
It meant you had full control, yes. But it also meant that any virus or piece of malware that tricked you into running it also had full control. A virus could rewrite critical system files, install a rootkit deep in the OS, could do anything it wanted without ever asking for permission. Microsoft was getting absolutely hammered by malware. The Trustworthy Computing Initiative was basically Bill Gates saying, this has to stop now.
So UAC was the answer. The idea was to make everyone run as a lower privilege standard user most of the time and only elevate to administrator when you absolutely had to.
That was the core idea. But there's a technical detail here that almost everyone missed at the time. When the screen went dark, that was called the secure desktop. That wasn't just for, dramatic effect.
I always just thought it was the computer thinking really, really hard about what I just asked it to do.
No. What was actually happening was that Windows was switching to a completely different, isolated desktop session that no other software on your computer could see or interact with. While you're on that secure desktop, no malware, no script, no keylogger can programmatically click the Allow button for you. The only input it will accept is from the physical human being sitting at the physical mouse and keyboard.
Whoa. Okay, so it was a physical verification. It was making sure a person was actually there in the room giving the command.
Exactly. It was, from a security engineering standpoint, a brilliant mechanism. The problem was that it ran headfirst into a software ecosystem that had gotten really, really lazy.
What do you mean by lazy?
Well, for 10 years, software developers, and I'm talking about big companies like Adobe, Intuit, you name it, had been writing their Windows applications, assuming they would always have full administrator rights. So they do sloppy things, like trying to save user configuration files into the program files folder, which is a protected system directory, instead of into the user's My Documents folder where it belongs.
And in XP, that worked just fine. Nobody noticed.
It was fine in XP. But in Vista, trying to write to a system folder is a major security violation. So when you ran your old version of TurboTax on Vista and it tried to save a file where it shouldn't, Vista would freak out.
And it would throw up a UAC prompt. Hey, this program is trying to do something sketchy. But as a user, I have no idea why. I just think this is being annoying again.
You're just getting spanked. But you don't know that Vista is actually trying to scold the application's developer. And that is the absolute core of the martyr argument. Because Vista was so annoying about this, and because users complained so loudly to the software companies, it forced the entire industry to clean up its act.
Ah, so developers had to go back and update their code to follow the new rules.
They had to. They started saving files in the right places. They started respecting the user privilege model. And so, by the time Windows 7 came along a few years later,
The software was already fixed.
the whole ecosystem had been house-trained. You saw way fewer UAC prompts in Windows 7, partly because Microsoft did tune it to be a bit less chatty, but mostly because the software you were running had finally learned to behave itself. Vista took all the heat to force the industry to grow up.
That is. Wow, it's actually kind of tragic in a way. It's like Vista was the strict parent that none of the kids liked, which then allowed Windows 7 to swoop in and be the cool aunt.
And it wasn't just about software. Let's talk about hardware drivers. This is another one of those under-the-hood areas where Vista just broke a ton of stuff for a very good reason.
I have a very clear memory of this. I did a clean install of Vista on my desktop, and my really nice, expensive sound card it stopped working correctly.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it had bugs. I mean, like, core features were just gone.
That would be because of the complete from-the-ground-up rewrite of the Windows audio stack. See, in Windows XP, audio drivers ran in what's called kernel mode.
Okay, break that down for us. Kernel mode versus user mode.
The kernel is like the absolute core of the operating system. It's the VIP lounge. It has unrestricted access to all the hardware. If a piece of code running in the kernel, what we call ring zero, crashes, the entire computer crashes with it, that's a blue screen of death.
So in XP, if my audio driver had a bug and it crashed,
Your entire PC would reboot. And Microsoft had all this crash telemetry data from XP, and they saw that a huge percentage of all system crashes were being caused by poorly written third-party drivers, specifically audio and video drivers. So for Vista, they made a radical change. They moved the core audio processing into user mode.
which is where the normal apps live.
Yeah.
Cheap seats.
Exactly. It's where your web browser and your notepad run. Now, if an audio driver crashes in user mode, okay, maybe your sound stops working. Maybe you have to restart Spotify. But the computer itself, the operating system, keeps on running. No blue screen.
That sounds objectively 100% better. So why was it a problem for anyone?
Because it broke all the fancy hardware acceleration. Companies like Creative Labs, who made the Sound Blaster cards, their whole business model relied on having that deep kernel access to do cool stuff like EAX, environmental audio effects for games, directly on their own chips. Vista severed that direct connection. All of a sudden, your $150 sound card performed no better than the cheap audio chip built into the motherboard. Gamers were absolutely furious.
They felt like they paid for a premium feature and Vista just took it away.
They were downgraded from a features perspective. But from a system stability perspective, it was a massive, massive upgrade. The number of system crashes caused by bad audio drivers plummeted to almost zero. Again, Vista makes the tough, correct, long-term architectural decision, and in the short term, the enthusiasts and the power users just crucify them for it.
It really does seem like every single major decision was this trade-off. Long-term gain for very immediate, very loud, short-term pain. Was it the same story with the networking stack?
Absolutely. They rewrote the entire TCP/IP stack from scratch. It had much better security, full native support for IPv6, theoretically better performance, but in the initial release, it had some really embarrassing bugs.
Oh, don't tell me. The infamous file copy dialog box. The calculating time remaining bug.
The one and only, where you'd try to copy a file over your home network and it would sit there for 2 minutes and then tell you, estimated time remaining, 3,700 years.
Yes, I remember that. It was a total joke.
It was a bug in the new network throttling algorithm. And look, to be fair, they fixed it in Service Pack 1, but by then it was a meme. The perception damage was already done. And while we're on performance, we have to talk about superfetch.
Right. This was the memory management thing where people would open their task manager, see that they had 0 free RAM, and immediately have a panic attack.
This was a complete philosophical change from how Windows used to work. In the XP world, having lots of free RAM was seen as a good thing. It meant your computer had room to breathe. Vista's philosophy was completely different. It was, unused RAM is wasted RAM.
Which, when you think about it, makes perfect sense. I paid for 4 gigabytes of memory. I want the OS to be using it for something.
Exactly. Superfetch was this clever system that used a bit of machine learning to watch your usage patterns. If it noticed that you open your email client every single weekday morning at 9 a.m., It would start preloading the necessary parts of that program into any unused RAM at, say, 8:58 a.m.
So when you click the icon, it opens instantly.
instantly. And if another application suddenly needed that memory, Vista would immediately release it. It was just a smart cache. But users didn't get it. They'd look at their RAM usage sitting at 90% when the computer was just idling on the desktop, and they'd scream, "Bloat! This thing is bloated!"
It's that classic gap between perception and technical reality.
The story of Vista, right there.
Okay, let's fast forward to the launch. It's January 2007. The marketing blitz is everywhere. The slogan is, "The wow starts now." But for most people, the reality was less wow and more of a dull thud.
A very loud, very expensive thud. We already talked about the hardware requirement confusion, but the driver nightmare was arguably even worse because Microsoft had changed the fundamental driver model for everything. Graphics, sound, networking, printers, scanners, all of those old reliable XP drivers just stopped working.
So on day one, you upgrade to Vista, and your perfectly good scanner is now just a paperweight.
And this created a horrible chicken and the egg problem. The hardware companies, HP, Canon, Epson, they didn't want to spend the money to write brand new Vista drivers for their older products until a lot of people were using Vista. But users didn't want to switch to Vista until they knew all their hardware would have drivers.
Just a total standoff.
And on launch day, it meant that thousands and thousands of common peripherals were just dead in the water. And who does the average user blame? Do they blame Canon for not wanting to support a 4-year-old scanner anymore? Of course not. They blame Microsoft for breaking their computer.
And on top of all that, you have this DRM controversy, the protected video path. This feels like such a mid-2000s problem, all tied up with the format war between HD DVD and Blu-ray.
Oh, it was a massive deal in the tech community at the time. To appease the Hollywood studios, Microsoft built this incredibly complex hardware-level encryption system into the video pipeline. The deal was basically, if you want Windows to be able to play these new high-definition encrypted movie discs, you have to help us lock down the entire signal path so people can't easily pirate them.
I remember reading some of the technical critiques of this. Critics were calling it a suicide note for the platform. They were saying the OS would actually intentionally make your video quality worse if it detected an unsecured monitor cable.
That was from a famous analysis by a security researcher named Peter Gutman. And his argument was that Microsoft was basically adding cost, complexity, and points of failure to everyone's hardware just to serve the interests of the movie industry. Now, in practice, most normal users probably never even noticed it. But philosophically, for the power users, the enthusiasts, it was another nail in the coffin. It fed this growing narrative that Vista was actively hostile to its own users.
Hostile security, hostile DRM, hostile hardware requirements. The whole brand was just becoming toxic. And meanwhile, Apple is just relentlessly hammering them with those, "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" ads.
Oh, the cancel or allow ad, where the PC is just asking for permission to do anything?
Yeah.
Those were devastating because they were so relatable. They were true. By 2008, Microsoft was bleeding reputation. They had to do something drastic to prove that the software itself wasn't the problem anymore. The brand's reputation was the problem.
And this is where the Mojave experiment comes in.
This was, you have to admit, a stroke of marketing genius.
Yeah.
This is in 2008, after Service Pack 1 has been released and has fixed a lot of the worst performance bugs. Microsoft goes out and finds a bunch of people who self-identify as hating Windows Vista.
Yeah.
People who say they'd rate it a 1 or a 2 out of 10.
The true haters.
The haters. And they sit them down in a focus group and they say, "We want to show you a sneak peek of our next new operating system. It's codenamed Mojave." And they just let them use it for 10 minutes.
And what was the feedback?
It was glowing. Wow, this is so much faster. The search is incredible. This is beautiful. On average, they rated Mojave a 9 out of 10. And then, of course, came the big reveal.
You've actually been using Windows Vista this whole time.
Exactly. It was a perfect demonstration that by that point, the code was actually pretty good, but the brand name Vista was just hopelessly tarnished.
It proved the damage was done. The market had moved on. Businesses were actively refusing to upgrade. This is when we started seeing that whole downgrade rights thing, right?
Which has to be one of the most humiliating things for a software company to endure. Microsoft's own enterprise licensing agreements had a clause that allowed a business who bought a new PC with a Vista license to legally ignore Vista and install Windows XP on it instead.
So Dell and Lenovo were shipping brand new high-end PCs in 2008 with Windows XP pre-installed stickers on them because that's what their big corporate clients were demanding.
It's like buying a brand new 2008 car and telling the dealership, yeah, but I want you to put the engine from the 2001 model in there because I'm just more comfortable with that one.
It's unbelievable.
And that's what forced Microsoft's hand. They knew they couldn't save the Vista brand. They had to accelerate the next release. They needed a clean slate. They needed Windows 7.
Okay, so this brings us to the real climax of your Vista the Martyr theory. Windows 7 launches in October 2009, and it is universally praised. It is hailed as the savior, the golden child. It fixed everything.
But here's the secret that every low-level engineer at Microsoft knows. Windows 7 is just Windows Vista Service Pack 3 with a new taskbar and better wallpaper.
Wait, hold on. I don't know if I buy that. I use both. And 7 felt completely different. It felt so much faster, so much lighter.
It felt faster because they made some very clever tweaks to the UI. They shortened the animation times, so Windows appeared to open faster. It felt lighter because they fine-tuned Superfetch, and they dialed back the aggressiveness of UAC. But the core architecture, the kernel, the driver model, the audio stack, the networking stack, the DWM graphics engine, it was all pure Vista.
So Windows 7 was really just standing on Vista's shoulders?
I'd say it was standing on Vista's grave. Just think about the context. By late 2009, that initial hardware shock was over. The average new PC you bought in 2009 didn't have 512 megs of RAM. It had 4 gigabytes of RAM and a dual-core CPU.
So that heavy Aero glass interface wasn't so heavy anymore.
Exactly. Moore's Law had finally caught up with Microsoft's ambition. And even more importantly, by 2009, all the hardware manufacturers had already spent 3 painful years writing stable Vista drivers for their products. So when you installed Windows 7, all the drivers you needed, they just worked.
And all the software companies had already learned their lesson and stopped trying to write to protected system folders.
Yes. Windows 7 got to make this grand entrance into a world that Vista had spent 3 bloody years preparing for it. Vista went ahead with a machete, cleared all the jungle, fought all the battles with the vendors and developers, and then Windows 7 just strolled in, planted a flag, and took all the credit.
And it got all the credit.
Every last bit. In fact, Microsoft even eventually released something called the Platform Update for Vista, which backported a bunch of Windows 7's core components, like DirectX 11 and some of the UI elements, back to Vista. If you took a fully patched Vista machine in 2010 and put it next to a Windows 7 machine, it was honestly hard to tell the difference in performance.
So looking back on the whole legacy, it was a commercial failure, a PR disaster for sure, but technically,
it might have been the most important Windows release since Windows 95. It was the painful, awkward, and necessary transition from the old, insecure, anything-goes era of the 90s PC to the modern, secured, GPU-accelerated era we live in now.
It was the vegetables. It was the vegetables we all had to be forced to eat before we were allowed to have the dessert that was Windows 7.
That's it. Nobody ever gets excited about eating their broccoli, but without it, the whole system eventually gets sick and falls apart.
So I want to leave our listeners with one final thought experiment, a little what-if scenario. We all complained endlessly about UAC. We hated the security pop-ups. We hated the broken compatibility.
Oh, yeah. But just imagine for a second that Microsoft had caved to that pressure. Imagine in 2005 they had said, you know what? This is too hard. Our customers hate this. Let's just stick with the XP security model. Let's just keep everyone running as an administrator by default. Let's keep the kernel wide open for any driver to mess with.
And then imagine trying to drag that architecture into the 2010s.
Right. Into the era of sophisticated ransomware, the era of massive state-sponsored cyber attacks, the era of the drive-by download where just visiting the wrong website could compromise your entire system.
It is a genuinely terrifying thought. If we had entered the modern, hyper-connected internet with the fundamental security model of Windows XP, I honestly believe the Windows platform could have collapsed under the weight of malware. The problem would have been so unmanageable that businesses and consumers would have fled to more lockdown, walled garden systems.
So in a strange way, all of Vista's annoying, nagging, in-your-face security prompts were like a vaccine. They inoculated the entire Windows world. It hardened the target. It wasn't fun, it wasn't elegant, and it certainly wasn't cheap. But when you look at the threat landscape we face today, I think you have to look back and say, thank you, Vista. You were an absolute mess, but you were the mess we had to have.
A necessary mess. I think that is the perfect epitaph for it. So next time you see that old Vista logo, maybe don't groan. Maybe just give a little nod of respect to the martyr of the PC. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive.
See you next time.